Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S MindLab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wondered if language structure affects how we understand things around us, even if it is not spoken language? Well, this new study dives into that very question. This research is all about how our brains process sentences, and whether the way those sentences are put together, their structure makes it easier or harder to notice unexpected things happening while we're trying to understand. Now, usually when scientists study this, they use spoken words and maybe a little sound, like a click, to see if it messes with our listening. But these researchers had a really cool idea. What if we applied this to sign language? So think about it. In any language, words or signs aren't just randomly thrown together. They form groups kind of like building blocks, and these groups are nested inside each other. This is what they call hierarchical constituent structure. It is like a sentence has a main idea and then smaller ideas within that, all organized. The researchers wanted to know if this organization in German Sign Language, or DGS, plays a role in how quickly people can spot something odd, like a sudden visual flash while they are watching a signed sentence. They designed a clever experiment. Imagine watching a video of someone signing a sentence. Now, right in the middle of that video, a quick white flash appears. Your job is to press a button as fast as you can when you see that flash. The really interesting part is where that flash shows up in relation to the sentence's structure. It could happen between big chunks of the sentence, between smaller chunks, or not at a break at all. They did this with deaf signers who use DGS as their main language, and also with hearing people who don't know DGS at all, just to make sure any effects weren't just about seeing a flash, but about how the language structure itself might be affecting things. And here is the surprising part. When they crunched all the numbers, they found nothing. No difference in how quickly people spotted the flash, no matter where it appeared in the DGS sentence's structure. This was true for both the experienced signers and the people who didn't know the language. This is a really important finding because it suggests that perhaps for sign language, the way people process the visual information is super efficient. But the story doesn't end there. The researchers did some extra digging, some exploratory analyses, and found something else pretty neat. Even though the non-signers didn't understand DGS, their responses were still affected by certain visual cues, like eyebrow movements. This hints that even without knowing the specific language, some of these manual signals in sign language might look like general communicative gestures that we all pay attention to. So, what does this all mean? The researchers think that spoken language, being mostly one thing after another, might be more easily disrupted by distractions. But sign language, with its hands, mouth movements, and facial expressions all happening at the same time or overlapping, is like a super rich signal. This richness might make it very robust, meaning it's hard for an extra visual flash to mess up how people understand it. The structure isn't really making it harder or easier to spot the flash because the whole signal is just so packed with information. And for those non-signers, it seems we're wired to pick up on some basic facial gestures that look like communication, regardless of whether we know the lingo. This research is super important because it builds on years of work trying to understand how our brains handle language. Scientists have long known that spoken words are structured, and this structure affects how we process them. They've done experiments before where they play a sentence and insert a little click sound. If the click happens at a certain point in the sentence's structure, people tend to notice it more or guess wrong about when it happened. This suggests they're really paying attention to the grammatical flow. This is the classic click paradigm they're talking about. It basically uses auditory clicks to reveal how our brains are parsing spoken sentences. If a click lands in a sensitive spot, like a boundary between major parts of a sentence, people might mislocate it or be slower to respond. This shows that the structure itself is influencing their perception and processing load. But here's the kicker. This study is the first to try and adapt this famous click paradigm to sign language. Instead of sound clicks, they use visual flashes inserted into videos of DGS. They wanted to see if the same kind of structural effects would pop up in the visual world of sign language. They really went to town creating these DGS sentences with specific structures. They had deaf sign language experts help make sure the sentences were natural and grammatically correct. Then they carefully placed these white flashes at different points within those structures. And it's great they pre-registered their plans. This means they decided upfront exactly what they were going to test and how before they even started collecting data. That makes the results much more trustworthy. They started with 80 deaf signers, which is a good number. But after cleaning up the data, like removing people who didn't pay enough attention or didn't do well on comprehension checks, they ended up with 53 participants for their main analysis. And for the control group, they had hearing non-signers. This is crucial. If the hearing non-signers showed the same patterns as as the signers, it would suggest the effect isn't purely about the DGS grammar itself, but maybe just about seeing a flash. Picture this, you are watching a video of someone signing a sentence. It's like a mini-movie, suddenly, boom, a flash. You gotta hit that spacebar fast. They tested flashes in the first part of the sentence and the second part, and at different breakpoints within the sentence's structure. Don't worry about the jargon like phonological parameter or place of articulation. The main point here is that they were careful not to accidentally make some flashes stand out more just because of the sound or visual properties of the signs around them. They wanted the structure to be the only thing that should matter. They followed their pre-registered plan, which is like a scientific roadmap, ensuring a fair and unbiased approach to analyzing the data. Okay, now for the statistics, they used what is called a generalized linear mixed effects model. Think of this as a sophisticated tool that looks at how fast people responded, and it considers that each person might react a little differently. It helps them figure out if the differences they see are real or just random luck. And here is the big news from the main experiment. The model didn't find any evidence that the structure of the DGS sentence affected how quickly the deaf signers spotted the flash. It didn't matter if the flash was at a major break, a minor break, or no break at all. Their reaction times were pretty much the same across all these conditions. This chart here, figure 2, shows the reaction times for the deaf signers. You can see the lines are all over the place, showing no clear pattern related to the sentence structure. And for the hearing non-signers, the control group, they also found no effect of the sentence structure. This is exactly what the researchers expected for this group, since they shouldn't be processing the DGS grammar. This strengthens the idea that the lack of effect in the signers wasn't because they misunderstood the task, but because of how sign language itself works. Now, remember those exploratory analyses? This is where things get a bit more nuanced, when they looked at sentences that used a special grammatical feature called topicalization, basically highlighting a part of the sentence. By moving it to the front, they found something. Both the signers and the non-signers were generally slower to respond to flashes in sentences that had this topicalization. This is fascinating because it means something about the sentence structure. Even if it is not about the grammatical breaks, does influence how people react. It made them a little slower overall. And this took place not just with the deaf signers, but also with the hearing non-signers. This is the really interesting part. It implies that these non-signers, even without understanding the grammatical rule, were reacting to this topicalization cue. Then came the Bayesian analysis. This is a fancier way of looking at the data to see how much evidence there is for or against a particular finding. For the deaf signers, it confirmed there was no real evidence for the sentence structure affecting flash detection. But interestingly, it did find some evidence for an effect of position, meaning maybe flashes in the first half of the sentence were slightly different from the second half. But this might be due to other things. For the hearing non-signers, it also found that effect of position, again more evidence for it than for the sentence structure itself. This suggests that maybe where the flash is in the first or second half has some effect, but it is not necessarily because of the grammar of the sign language, and it is not a strong effect. So, to wrap it all up, the big takeaway is that while we know sentence structure is super important for spoken language, this study suggests that for sign language, it might not have the same impact on how quickly we spot distractions. The researchers propose this might be because sign language is so visually rich. All the parts, the hands, the facial expressions, the mouth movements are happening at once. This makes the communication very dense and perhaps very resilient to interference. It is like your brain is getting so many signals at once that an extra flash just doesn't throw it off as much as it might in spoken language where information often comes in a more linear, one after another fashion. This diagram, figure 4, helps illustrate that point. On one hand, you have spoken language, which is mostly sequential. On the other, you have sign language, where different elements are happening simultaneously. Now, it is important to mention a caveat, as good scientists do. The click paradigm itself is based on some assumptions, like it perfectly measures processing load. Some other researchers have questioned if that is always true. They found that sometimes people might just be biased towards certain locations, like sentence boundaries, even without a flash. So, does this mean sentence structure isn't important in sign language? Absolutely not. The researchers are very clear that the linguistic evidence for structure in sign languages is really strong. It's just that this particular experiment, using this specific visual flash method, didn't show that structure affecting how quickly people spotted the flash. It's more about the limits of this particular experimental tool for measuring that specific aspect of sign language processing. And remember those important findings from the exploratory analyses. The fact that both signers and non-signers reacted differently to those topicalized sentences with slower response times is a big deal. It shows that even without understanding the grammar, those eyebrow raises that signal topicalization are picked up by people, perhaps because they resemble universal gestures. This suggests that non-manuals might have a broader communicative role that even non-linguists perceive. The researchers even suggest that the fact that both groups showed a position effect and not a structure effect might mean that this position effect in the original click paradigm studies wasn't about linguistic processing load after all, but more about general attention. Maybe the trial is just more engaging in the first half, or less predictable. So, what is the main takeaway for us? This study is a fascinating adaptation of a classic tool to a new domain. It tells us that the way sign language is visually presented, with all its layers of information, makes it very robust. Our brains are really good at processing this rich visual input. So much so that a simple visual distraction doesn't seem to be heavily influenced by the intricate grammatical structure in the way we see with spoken language. And it also highlights how much we might unconsciously pick up on communicative gestures, even when we don't understand the language. It really makes you think about how diverse and powerful human communication is, and how our brains are uniquely equipped to handle it, whether it is spoken words or meaningful signs. It also opens the door for future research, maybe using different methods to explore sign language structure and processing. What did you think of these findings? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dive into the fascinating world of psycholinguistics and sign language, please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to RUBIN'S MindLab for more explorations into the human mind, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Thanks for watching, and stay curious.